Hello, welcome to London Euston Station. This is Train Simulator Classic, and we're going to take on the 1502 Avanti West Coast service to Holyhead. In part one, we'll have a trip down the West Coast main line and take it as far as Crewe, and then in part two, I'll have a ride over the North Wales coast route all the way through to Holyhead. So to begin with, let's set the destination to Holyhead. There we go. And of course, the one thing you might have noticed straight away is that we're going to ride the Class 805. There was an excellent reskin available of this from Semaphore Simulations, and it's really nice looking. Of course, in real life, the train has yet to make it into active service. It's been on trials for a few months. Let's get the thing set up.
TPWS and AWS operational.
That sorts that out. I'll turn off the DRA because the signal is on green. And then let's open the doors. You might have noticed straight away that there's a slightly different appearance. I wanted to try and replicate those Amptel tower blocks that preside over London Euston Station, and a little bit crudely done, but it's about the best I could do as far as reskinning, but hopefully just a little bit better than the offering from Dovetail Games originally. Let's just set the lights up as well. I think we want markers only on, as this is a daytime run. And we've got the right away from the guard, so let's get moving. London Euston looking very, very full, which is nice to see. I'm speeding already. Going to take line X, which means we'll dive underneath Camden Bank and then emerge onto the downfast at Primrose Hill. It's only fairly recently that the units have been painted from being all white into the Avanti West Coast colours. You have to be quite careful trying to control the speed, because we descend downhill very quickly and then we've got quite a sharp uphill gradient. The catenary is modelled quite nicely on this route. Really just give you a feel of the West Coast main line, which is, my point of view, my home route really. Normally heading out from Crewe or Stoke if I'm going down to London. Scenario itself I've downloaded from Alan Thomson Simulation, and actually it's the 1508 London Euston to Glasgow that has been represented, but I've just substituted the train and altered the timing a little bit. Quite a few tunnels on the early section of the line as we dive out of London through the suburbs. These flats on the left, quite interesting. In real life, it looks a little bit like the side of a football stadium, and I think that's for noise cancelling effects. It'd be lovely to see a custom build of them. They're very unusual looking building in real life. Well, we can get our speed up to 80 miles an hour now, soon be 100. Royal Mail Parcels building on the left. And the Queen's Park area, Bakerloo line from Elephant Castle, and it goes alongside the West Coast main line as far as Harrow and Wealdstone. Of course, you can do that run on Train Sim World. It's what's pretty good about Train Simulator at the moment, both with Train Sim Classic and Train Sim World. You can do so many full runs now in the UK, much of the network is covered. Even the seats have been quite nicely represented. It's a very well done reskin. And when this unit does enter service, eventually it will be to eliminate the voyages in use, so it means electric as far as Crewe, and then diesel hauled from Crewe to Holyhead. This of course a bi-mode train. presume in real life, probably, because it's not tilting, you most likely wouldn't be able to go above 110 mile an hour, so I might be breaking all the rules in the book by going at 125 today. Now we have Wembley Stadium, of course, in the background. And we have our first sight of a Bakerloo line train on the way to Harrow and Wealdstone. As we head towards 125, if I remember how to set it up, then we could use speed control on this thing. I think that switched it on. There's a London Overground service to Watford Junction, of course. DC lines on third rail between London Euston and Watford Junction on our left, and all station service. This is Harrow and Wealdstone. So hopefully the speed set should keep us at 125. It says we're speeding there, but in fact it will hold it at 125. That's a bit of a train sim bug. A slight reduction in speed down to 110. This is Bushy. Of course, the line dives away on the left and takes in Watford High Street and eventually comes towards Watford Junction. What I've tried to do here is just to change the scenery a little bit, and I've put in a Tesco. We've got the Tesco petrol station as well. Just felt again that the default stuff was just a little bit too generic. It's easy enough to swap things out. There's an extensive library, and of course you can do that for your own use. Here's Watford Junction, the branch to the right, of course, to St Albans Abbey. I think that is a downloadable route. I've never done that one, actually. And eagle-eyed viewers might note that the 1502 doesn't stop at Rugby, but it's just the fact that that's a change in route. We'll be moving on to Trent Valley at that point, so it seemed to make sense to have a stop at Rugby. And then it'll be Stafford and then Crewe. Slow lines even come back in on the right. Never quite remember all the stations this side of Milton Keynes. There's Kings Langley coming up, and we've got the M25 motorway over us just before the station. We've got a couple of southbound Avanti West Coast Pendolino services that are held. Slightly worrying when you see AI trains that aren't moving. I'm sounding me home, but I suspect that the fast line platforms on these stations aren't actually in use. They won't have regular stops. Quite nice to ride on these units when they are in active service on the West Coast Main Line. I think the Voyagers become a little bit tired, and maybe we'll get rid of those smelly toilets. taking the acceleration off because we have a neutral section coming up. Might have been one or two already on the run that I've not noticed. That's the white cross that signifies the neutral section. We're past that now, but we've got a slight reduction in speed to 115 coming up. This is Berkhamsted on the sharp bend. There are a couple of excellent free cab rides on YouTube on the West Coast Main Line out of Euston. There's one or two paid ones as well from Video 125. There's an older Royal Scot one with a Class 87, and then a more recent one, a run to Manchester in the Pendolino. That was when they were still in Virgin colours. And that is the one thing missing. We can't have a full run to Manchester Piccadilly, unfortunately, at the moment. That's something I'd like very much to see. This is Tring. And then it's followed by Tring Cutting. I think getting back to the 1800s when this was built, there were many men killed building Tring Cutting. It was a very difficult operation. And as far as I recall, I think it's been pretty much uphill most of the way, very slightly from Euston to Tring, but I think it's essentially downhill now to Rugby. Remember many years ago, the very first simulation from using the Commodore 64. It was a text-based run, no train sounds, no graphics. It was very much in your imagination, and we've come quite a way since then. The sounds of the unit are from Armstrong Powerhouse. It's an enhancement pack of their Class 800 series. I'd love to be able to drive it without that HUD thing at the bottom, but I don't quite know the line speeds well enough and the exact points at which the speeds swap and change a little bit. It's interesting when you hear real-life train drivers driving a route they know and you could understand the stopping points properly. Again, just ease the power off for the neutral section. Here it is. Stations are really nicely modelled by Dovetail Games. We'll soon be back up to 125 again. Again, of course, you can't speed up to that line speed limit until the whole of the train. This is a 10-car unit. In reality, I think it's two 5-car units stuck together until the whole train is past the speedboard sign. Those round symbols that we see with the speed limit on, they're called Morpeth boards, and that was following a big train crash in the 1980s involving the sleeper train, where I think they wanted to make it just a bit clearer than it used to be in the past. Reading the other day, apparently some technicality when they were first introduced, despite the fact they were called Morpeth boards, they weren't actually put in place at Morpeth, but I think they're there now. that's better. We've got a southbound Pendolino that's actually moving this time. There's Bletchley. Before the days of Milton Keynes Central being built, many of the stoppage services out of EUSTON used to terminate at Bletchley. That all changed in 1982 when we had the new station at Milton Keynes. A new platform that's been added in the last few years. I think that we're going to go past here. This is Milton Keynes Central. Got a train from there fairly recently and I struggled to find where the entrance to it was. About to pass through Wolverton. Don't know whether it still is. It always used to be the home of the Royal Train. Quite interested to look at some of these locations sometimes on Google Earth, and you realise what the differences are in terms of the buildings, and there's such a huge list of assets that are available now and content from different routes, and particularly the Just Trains routes, and you can quite easily substitute them, but I think to get every building looking pretty much accurate you could spend your whole life doing, really. I don't like those office buildings, for instance, on the right. They look very, what I think people call Cuju-esque, which was the original maker of this game. Disused station. I don't think I can ever remember running a non-stop run from Euston to Rugby before. It's quite nice to be travelling through at speed. I'm sure I will record videos in different weather, but it's quite nice to have it in summer weather and That's when it's really nice to be travelling on the train, when you've got this lovely outlook. Yeah, I've got a suspicion I should be doing 110 here, really. But sometimes on Train Simulator, there's nothing wrong with breaking the rules a little bit. Not even totally sure if you do cut the power nowadays with neutral section signs. It used to be always considered the right thing to do because the train would jolt a little bit, but I don't know whether they still do that. One run I would like to do in the future, there was a very nice Class 87 London Euston to Glasgow Central in Virgin Train colours, a full run, and I'll perhaps upload that at some point. This is where we split away. The lines down the bottom to our right go off to Northampton. We don't have that in the game at the moment. There is a version of this route that you can download which has already got the Northampton lines in. But we are 2-track now. Those Northampton lines rejoin us again just before Rugby. While to get used to Avanti West Coast colours. It seemed so strange. It was very much Richard Branson's baby, the Pendolino, but they look okay now. And here I am trying to drive pretty accurately. I didn't even notice that the speed limit had dropped to 120 there. Oh, we're back up to 125 now. But it is quite bendy. I think that's why essentially only the Pendolinos could do the full line speed. But hey ho. We've got special dispensation today. Ah, we do have sight now of the M1 motorway. Looks a bit lighter for traffic than you would normally expect to see. And there's a gap in the hills here. So you've got three things going on. You've got the railway, you've got the canal, you've got the M1 motorway. And we're not too far off from a very small village in this area known as Watford. And that's why we have Watford Gap services. It always seems madness to me that they would call the services Watford Gap. Yes, there is a place called Watford in this area, tiny little village, but of course everybody else only knows of Watford that's near to London. I suspect has confused people a lot down the years. It's always quite satisfying when you're on the train, though, to find yourself hurtling alongside the M1 and overtaking all the cars. It doesn't matter. Your Porsche drivers, There's Watford Gap services, by the way. At least a representation on it. I don't think we've got a southbound, have we? Yeah, we have. We have got a southbound representation of it a little bit. That's the last we'll see of the M1 alongside, anyway. Again, I've forgotten about the speed limit. In real life, as a train driver, you can't sort of meander your way through. You've got to be really concentrating, always knowing where you are, where every location is. This is Kilsby Tunnel. Again, a massive engineering feat, and I think there is a little gap in the middle there for ventilation, and you could see there's some sort of tower on the land side. Was a Voyager service that's just passed us. That's some of them come from Birmingham New Street occasionally, but the majority tend to be either from Chester or Holyhead. And of course these units will eventually replace them. Just slowing down because we've got a double yellow. And now we've got a single yellow, so we've got a red coming up. Always get a bit worried with Train Simulator. You know, is there a problem? Are we going to make it to the final destination? I hope so, because the Glasgow train was originally going to be routed into platform 2 anyway. But we might in reality be running a little bit early. I know listening to the real drivers, they're conscious of telling you that you have to be very, very cautious approaching a red signal. So we've got the Watford, the Northampton lines on our right have rejoined us. And we're 4-track then pretty much all the way through to Crewe. Well, it says we're denied, so there's something that's holding us up. Yeah, there's a red beyond there. Trying to work out what the issue is, to be honest. Don't see anything on the platform. This is a little bit concerning. Let's just async keys it a little bit to speed things up. It does say estimated time of arrival 15:57, so that implies that there is something that is stopping access. Aha, now then, that might be the reason. So if that's signalled into platform 2, then there would be... Yeah, there we are, yeah, we're okay. Sometimes you're kind of aware with Train Simulator that the signalling isn't absolutely perfect, so you can get waits and then you never actually get a clear, so hopefully we're alright. I think with a single yellow we're not clear through to Rugby yet, I wouldn't have thought, because we're still 1.6 miles away. Unless my eyes are deceiving me, I think we are coming towards yellow, so that's good news. That must be some sort of approach control signal as well, because we're on green. And we've got a feather which indicates that we are crossing over. And that should take us nicely into platform 2. As you can see below, the speed limit over the junction is 40 miles an hour. We're coming into rugby now. In the 2000s, this had a massive upgrade. There used to be a huge, I think it was described once as a barn of a roof over the station, but we've got modern canopies now. Shame in a way to see all that gone. But they did an awful lot of work to ensure that through running trains could get quite quickly. See a 350 London North Western service coming into Rugby on the far side. And we should stop as close as we can to those markers at the end for a 10-coach train. That looks about right. Can't remember which button it was there. O to open the doors on the right. Lovely looking train. Right, okay, so that's the run to Rugby, and let's load up now part 2 and we'll carry on through to Stafford and then Crewe. So now leaving Rugby. I think the building on the right has inexplicably changed colour. Of course, we are on a different route in theory now, the Trent Valley line, which will take us through to Stafford. Of course, branching off to our left is the line to Birmingham New Street, or more accurately to Coventry, Birmingham International, Birmingham New Street, Wolverhampton, Penkridge, Stafford. But even back in the 1800s, the route builders at the time could see that it wasn't a good idea to thread all the main traffic through the Birmingham route. It would be too congested, so very sensibly they adopted this alternative route, which is a faster way through. We now once again have 125 mile an hour running. Pretty classic English rolling hills, countryside through Warwickshire into Staffordshire, and then as we get towards Crewe, finally into Cheshire. They're pretty quick accelerators. I still think of them as Zoomers, of course. That's a brand name that they use on LNER on the East Coast main line. This Class 800 series used by Transpennine Express, by Great Western as well, out of Paddington. Trent and Mersey Canal alongside us. Pretty much is a constant factor between here and Stafford, and then even beyond Stafford. If you were taking the line to Stoke-on-Trent, you would have it alongside you right the way through Stone, through Stoke, into Kidsgrove. I'm speeding a bit there. I think I've kind of forgotten with this speed set. There we are, I think we're okay now. Reminder that a real live train driver, of course, would be concentrating absolutely every single second and wouldn't let something like that happen. I'm quite sure of that. I remember watching an old rail scene video, I think it was Euston to Liverpool Lime Street, and I think it's available nowadays on YouTube, but there was a fantastic commentary by, I think he was the traction inspector at the time at London Euston, and he knew these lines absolutely inside out, provided a fascinating insight. Speed through Nuneaton, which is kind of the major station on the line between Rugby and Stafford. Seemed as though in the Virgin days they knocked off the Nuneaton stop quite a lot of the time, and I think there's a few more Avanti West Coast services that stop there nowadays. Not the case with this Holyhead service, which in reality the first stop would be Stafford. That was Atherstone. I think there's not too many stopping trains that actually stop there. Quite bendy in this section of the route. I think that's why we had the reduction down to 100 and then it went up to 115, now back to 125. Very rich farming country. It's nicely represented in the route. These lovely earthly rich summer colours. The Pride liveried Pendolino, I do believe. Quite an old route now, this Trent Valley. It was released a few years back by Thomson Interactive, and there was plenty of new assets that came with it at the time. So some people would suggest showing its age, but still pretty decent, I think. I think at the time it felt a bit of a non-entity, really, going from Rugby to Stafford. Once they'd done the bit from Euston to Rugby, and then we have the Alan Thomson route north from Stafford, then it all worked well. As much as though it would be nice to have a merged route that you could do in one go, in some ways it's quite nice to do this in stages. Yeah, I think in reality this would be a bit too bendy for 125 mile an hour running. Handy thing about the speed set, of course, you can set it to your desired speed and away it goes. Now, I think that was Lichfield, and of course you've got the cross city line. You have Tamworth first with the line that goes between Derby and Birmingham through Burton-on-Trent, Tamworth upper level, and then Lichfield cross city line which takes you to Birmingham New Street. Now you can see the cooling towers now of Rugeley Power Station, and of course you might say, well, if this is supposed to be a 2024 new running of the Class 805 service, then that's a bit inaccurate, but I couldn't quite bring myself to get rid of it. It's virtually impossible to be completely accurate with any route. It has to be set in a certain time, and there's always new buildings going up, old ones going down. Many years a familiar Burr as well, of where the merry-go-round coal trains used to come from Lichfield, Trent Valley. From Lichfield, from Rugeley, I should say, from the power station. I think I'm right in saying they would travel to Heath Colliery on the Stoke line to pick up coal. Now we've got a reduction down to 85 miles an hour. I expect there would be an audible sound for the actual reduction in the speed limit rather than the signal. I didn't mean to put the emergency brakes on. That might be the first error I've made of this run. Don't think we can do anything about it other than to grind to a halt now. But we did go through a single yellow there, so we have to be mindful that we're approaching a red coming up. And I believe this is College Junction, so the Stoke trains go that way to avoid Stafford. Apart from one train in the morning, I don't know about the evening. They basically do avoid Stafford, the Manchester to Euston trains. This was actually the scene of quite a crash in the 1980s when the train going towards Stoke misjudged the signals, got confused with the new flashing double yellows that have been put into action fairly recently, and they collided with the Liverpool to Euston train, and the driver of that train was killed outright. No other fatalities as I recall, which was a miracle really, and it showed the strength of the Mark III carriages at the time. Yeah, just checking whether we can pass the red in case the signals that there's an issue with, but it says not. So I assume we're being held for the 350. It is going to be double tracked through to Stafford once we get past College Junction. I think there is some sort of memorial in place somewhere around here following that crash in the 1980s. Ah, we're okay. I am using the TS controllers set up, and it's usually quite efficient, but I think my USB connection broke for a minute then, so it took me a little bit of sorting out, but we're okay again now. This is Shugborough Tunnel. To build a bypass to Shugborough Hall. I believe that's the only reason why we have Shugborough Tunnel. And I think you've got the lovely Milford Common as well. I seem to remember doing a bit of train watching in this neck of the woods many years ago. Something like the mid-1980s. We're not too far away from Stafford now. Back to 4 tracks again. We'll carry on with 4 tracks all the way through to Crewe. This is the quite celebrated Queensville curve, which I think there's many photographs down the years going back to Steam days. Good one for the zoom camera lenses to capture. And then we've got the line from Birmingham just rejoining us from the left. Of course, that's nicely represented on Train Sim now with the missing link route from Alan Thomson. Being routed into platform 3 at Stafford. Might be a bit busier in reality at 16:35 approaching rush hour. So we've had our short stop at Stafford, and we'll carry on now to Crewe, which is the end of part 1 of this recording of the journey, the 1502 to Holyhead. I've seen Stafford North signal box. We're on the down fast line now, so we can quickly accelerate up to line speed. And as I've mentioned once or twice, I think technically speaking we could really only go up to 110 because we're not tilting, but we are going to go up to 125 today. Just about to pass under the M6 motorway. Seems to be any traffic on it today. This is the West Coast Main Line, Midlands and North West, available from Alan Thomson Simulation. And a slight nuisance of having to do this in separate routes is having to set the train up each time. We are heading to a part of the route which has seen quite a transformation in the last few years. You can see the line going away on the left hand side, and that is to go over a flyover at Norton Bridge, which takes the Stoke line towards Stone and Stoke-on-Trent and on towards Kidsgrove, Macclesfield, Stockport, Manchester, Piccadilly. This is the site of the old Norton Bridge station. It used to be the case that trains for Birmingham that were going through Stoke would have to go across the main lines here. So the flyover, considerable expense, but it has meant a much more streamlined running. There's also kind of an extra through line as well. It's quite an extensive little network of lines that they put in. Always a little bit of a bottleneck, that area, in days gone by. There's no stations nowadays between Stafford and Crewe. There used to be Norton Bridge. That was on the Stafford to Stoke section, but they pulled up the bridge, which was the only way of getting access to Norton Bridge station, and that effectively closed the station in one fell swoop. And pre-beaching, there used to be stations at Whitmore and Madeley. Towards a section that I know pretty well in real life. Not far from where I live, but Stableford. It's quite eerie sometimes watching these replications of the route because it looks so realistic. Section I'm talking about. I know that footbridge that goes over. There's a caravan park over on the left. There's some farm buildings at the right. There's a couple of farmhouses as well that are missing actually, but that railing around the bridge, absolutely perfect. Totally sure we passed through an erroneous red light there, but certainly the line is clear, and that was a bit of a mistake if it was. We didn't get any prior warnings. We're coming to an area now. This was the site of Whitmore Station. Spent many a day sitting on the bank just beyond there watching the trains come through. It's a great place because you see the trains sweeping in round the bend and then round another bend. And then this section now is relatively straight to Crewe. And back in the 1930s, this used to be a place where the LMS, the London Midland Scottish Railway, used to run, or try to run high-speed steam trains. They were always trying to outdo the LNER on the East Coast, and this was just about the only straight running section that you got. It's pretty straight now from here through Madeley into Crewe, but it's not quite as generous as on the East Coast Main Line where they have Stoke Bank, so they used to really crank up the speed and try and beat these high-speed runs. I think on one famous occasion, this is sort of pre-Second World War, they were a bit late breaking into Crewe Station as a result, and all the crockery and the buffet cart came crashing down. Of course, ultimately, Mallard won the race on the East Coast Main Line at Stoke Bank, a world record of 112 26 mile an hour, which probably never be beaten. This is probably now the really straight bit now. Into Crewe. We'll get a bit of tile stutter, such as the huge amount of assets and everything else in and around the Crewe area. It's a massive replication. We've got Crewe, Basford, Hull yards coming in on the left. Of course, there is a freight avoiding line that avoids going through the heart of Crewe station. A lot of the freight go that way. People say that Crewe nowadays is nothing like it was in the 1980s when you had such a variety of diesel and electrics, but it's still pretty interesting. Got the line from Shrewsbury coming in from the left, the line from Stoke coming from the right. Of course, the main line will carry on through to Glasgow via the likes of Wigan, Warrington, Preston, Carlisle. The line to Manchester veers off to the right, and then in part two, we're speeding a bit, 20 mile an hour. Sort of, I thought it was a little bit further up the 20 mile an hour. Yeah, we'll be taking the North Wales coastline to the seaside. Initially through Chester and then on eventually into Anglesey and Holyhead. The only thing left to do when we arrive at Crewe is to convert to diesel mode, because of course it will be diesel for the remainder of the journey. Very nice replication of Crewe station. It's a massive delight when the Dovetail Games gave us Crewe to the game. I believe if we hold down the M key, we should convert our power to diesel. So we'll look down the train. You'll notice there's no pantograph up now. So join me again for part 2. Hope you've enjoyed part 1.